I had never thought a simple tube of lipstick could change everything. But there I was, sitting on the edge of Emma's bed, staring at the small red cylinder in my trembling hands. It had been lying on her dresser, glinting under the soft light from the bedside lamp, calling to me in a way that was impossible to resist. Emma had left for work early, and the apartment was silent except for the faint hum of traffic outside. I was alone, yet the anticipation curling in my stomach made me feel as if the whole world was watching. I'm Alex, 24, working as a junior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm, and entirely ordinary to anyone who knew me casually. Most people wouldn't suspect the hidden side of me that had grown quietly over the past year, a fascination with transformation, an obsession with experiencing femininity in private moments that no one would ever witness. It wasn't a matter of shame, exactly. It was a thrill, a private indulgence, a secret part of my identity that I had hidden under baggy clothes, messy hair, and a casual demeanor. Emma, my girlfriend of 2 years, had always been supportive in subtle ways. She noticed when I dressed differently at home, or when my voice carried a faintly higher tone when we were alone. But I had never confessed the full extent of my secret, how I loved the textures of skirts, the way a fitted blouse could change the curve of my torso, or how a pair of heels made me feel both elegant and vulnerable at the same time. It wasn't something I could admit yet, not to anyone, and especially not to her. That morning, as I sat there, holding her lipstick, I felt a rush of daring excitement. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye, and I hardly recognized the nervous, exhilarated expression staring back. I wanted to do it, to finally explore this world fully, even if only for a few hours, even if only in her absence. Emma had always been meticulous about her appearance. Her apartment reflected her personality, neat, carefully organized, warm and inviting, but also filled with small hints of luxury, soft blankets, scented candles, a collection of perfumes that smelled like a secret garden. Sitting here, alone in her space, I felt a mixture of thrill and guilt. I knew what I was about to do was technically borrowing, but I justified it in my mind as experimentation. I took a deep breath, rolling the lipstick between my fingers. It was sleek, red, and perfectly intimidating. For a moment, I remembered the first time I had ever tried makeup. Awkward, clumsy strokes that left me frustrated and humiliated in front of a tiny bathroom mirror. But today was different. Today, I had privacy. Today, I could explore without judgment. I opened the cap and examined the color. It was bold, daring, the kind of shade that demanded attention. I applied it slowly, letting the tip glide over my lips. The sensation was electric, a spark of confidence that I hadn't expected. My reflection seemed to shift subtly, as if the lipstick had unlocked a hidden version of myself, a version that could be seen, even if only by the mirror and my imagination. I couldn't resist experimenting further. I stood in front of the mirror, carefully rolling up the sleeves of one of Emma's blouses. The fabric was soft, delicate, a stark contrast to the rough texture of my usual t-shirt. I slipped it on, feeling it hug my shoulders and arms differently than anything I had worn before. The sensation was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. My hands shook slightly as I smoothed it over my chest, marveling at the transformation that even a single garment could provoke. Next came the skirt. Emma's wardrobe was a treasure trove, a universe of possibility. I slid my fingers along the hangers, hesitating for a heartbeat before choosing a simple but elegant black skirt. It was tight enough to accentuate the curves I was only beginning to explore, yet loose enough to allow movement. I stepped into it carefully, pulling it up over my hips, and immediately felt the strange but intoxicating tension of fabric against skin. My heart raced. Every step I took toward the mirror made me more aware of the delicate balance between my two identities, the Alex the world knew, and this daring, bold persona that existed in secret. Finally, the heels. Emma had a small collection of them, ranging from practical flats to dangerously high stilettos. I chose a pair that were just high enough to challenge me, but not so high that I couldn't move with some grace. The The moment my feet slid in, I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with a pinch of fear. Walking in them required concentration, careful attention to balance, and a deliberate elegance that made me feel like I had stepped into another world. Standing there, fully transformed, I barely recognized the reflections staring back. The lipstick, the blouse, the skirt, the heels, they were not just clothes or accessories. They were symbols of my hidden self, a secret identity that felt more real and vivid than anything I presented to the world during the day. I touched my lips, smiled at my reflection, and felt a shiver of delight and anxiety all at once. But with the thrill came a shadow. What if someone walked in? What if Emma came home early? My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The fear of being caught only amplified the excitement, the adrenaline surging through my veins. I knew that one wrong sound, one unexpected knock, could shatter this perfect, private world I had built for myself. I decided to take a moment, savor the transformation. I moved carefully around the apartment, testing my balance in the heels, feeling the skirt brush against my thighs, the blouse soft and smooth against my skin. Every movement felt like a small victory, every glance in the mirror a thrill. The world outside didn't exist. Only this secret, daring version of me mattered. And then, as I adjusted the lipstick for the 5th time, I heard it, the faint sound of keys in the door.
Emma.
She was back early. My heart lurched, and for the first time, I felt truly exposed, as if every secret I had cherished was hanging by a thread. I froze, caught between panic and exhilaration, realizing that the world I had stepped into so boldly could vanish in an instant. Would she understand? Would she accept this side of me? Or would everything, the thrill, the exploration, the secret identity I had nurtured, collapse under the weight of judgment and misunderstanding? In that moment, standing in Emma's apartment, dressed in her clothes, wearing her lipstick and teetering on heels I had only just mastered, I realized something terrifyingly beautiful. I could never go back to being the person everyone thought I was. Something had changed. I wasn't just Alex anymore. I was Alex and more. And with that realization, the sound of the door unlocking echoed through the apartment, leaving me frozen, breathless, and poised on the edge of exposure and revelation. The sound of Emma's keys clicking in the lock sent a jolt through my entire body. My hands froze midair, clutching the hem of her blouse as I balanced precariously on her heels. My reflection in the mirror revealed a version of myself that felt alive, daring, and utterly exposed all at once. This wasn't just crossdressing anymore. It was a full immersion into a side of me that I had only dared explore in solitude. And now, the threat of discovery made every movement a calculated risk. I slipped behind the bedroom door, peering through the crack as Emma entered. She hummed softly, oblivious to the small drama unfolding mere feet away. Relief and guilt collided in my chest, a tidal wave of emotion that left me breathless. I realized that the thrill I had sought was inseparable from danger, the very essence of the excitement that had drawn me into this world. Once Emma settled into the living room, I ventured into the open, moving with as much grace as I could muster. The skirt hugged my hips in a way that made my steps deliberate, the heels forcing me to engage every muscle for balance. Each movement was a silent dance, an intricate choreography between fear and exhilaration. I could feel the subtle shift in my posture, the way the fabric smoothed over my chest, the gentle sway of my hips, the way the lipstick highlighted the curve of my lips. Every detail heightened my sense of identity, my sense of self that had been buried beneath layers of ordinary life. The apartment, once familiar, now felt transformed. Shadows danced across the walls as sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor. Each corner, each piece of furniture seemed to whisper reminders of the secret I was living. I walked slowly, deliberately, testing my balance and control, my mind simultaneously thrilled and terrified. I moved to Emma's dresser, drawn to the accessories that had previously seemed mundane. A pair of dangling earrings caught my eye, gold, delicate, and elegant. I fastened them carefully, feeling the weight against my earlobes, a subtle reminder that my appearance now held power, presence, and vulnerability simultaneously. I lingered in front of the mirror, examining the reflection that was both familiar and alien. The person staring back wasn't just Alex. It was Alex, amplified, bold, and undeniably captivating. Despite the exhilaration, guilt gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I had borrowed without permission, trespassed into Emma's private world, and risked the delicate balance of our relationship. And yet, the thrill was irresistible. I realized that the emotional intensity, the mix of fear, excitement, and vulnerability, was inseparable from the physical transformation. Without one, the other would feel hollow. The hours stretched. Emma remained unaware, immersed in her work, and I took the opportunity to explore further. I experimented with subtle adjustments, rolling the blouse sleeves higher, shifting the skirt slightly for comfort and movement, practicing small steps to master the heels. Each action heightened my awareness of body mechanics, posture, and presence. I became attuned to the delicate interplay between external appearance and internal confidence. But this was not merely a physical exercise. Each adjustment brought waves of emotion, fleeting shame when I imagined someone discovering me, a rush of empowerment as I realized how poised and graceful I could be, and a tender curiosity about what others might think if they saw me like this. I thought about Emma, how she might react if she saw me fully transformed, bold, and confident. Would she understand, accept, or recoil? The uncertainty pressed heavily on my chest, amplifying both fear and desire. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, the room took on a warmer glow. I moved to the living room mirror, testing my reflection from every angle. The lipstick was perfectly applied, vibrant against my skin. The blouse and skirt flowed elegantly, framing my body in ways I had never imagined. And yet, each glance at the mirror reminded me of the precariousness of the moment. One wrong movement, one sound too loud, one unnoticed creak could bring the entire fantasy crashing down. A sudden noise startled me, a soft knock at the front door. My heart lurched, and I froze mid-step, heels clicking faintly against the hardwood floor. Emma wasn't due back yet. Who could it be? A neighbor? A delivery? The anxiety was immediate and visceral, a stark reminder of how fragile my secret life truly was. I tiptoed to the door, my balance wavering slightly in the heels, and peeked through the peephole. A young woman, unfamiliar, stood outside holding a package. My breath eased slightly, but the suspense lingered. Even mundane encounters had become fraught with tension, the fear of exposure ever present. I opened the door, mask of casual composure firmly in place, and accepted the package with trembling hands. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice slightly higher than usual, a subtle echo of the persona I was inhabiting. Once the door closed, I leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The adrenaline surged and ebbed, leaving a strange combination of exhilaration and exhaustion. I realized that the careful negotiation between exposure and concealment, confidence and vulnerability, was as addictive as the physical transformation itself. I returned to Emma's bedroom and examined the lipstick again. Its red brilliance seemed almost symbolic, daring, bold, transformative. The color wasn't merely cosmetic, it was a declaration, a signal to myself that I had stepped into a realm of self-expression I had long denied. And yet, the awareness that Emma could return at any moment kept my movements measured, my mind alert, my heart racing. Hours passed in a delicate rhythm, balancing the thrill of exploration with the constant fear of discovery. I practiced walking, adjusting my posture, testing the sway of the skirt, the tilt of the heels. Every motion, every glance in the mirror, reinforced a burgeoning confidence, a growing comfort in this dual identity that was both fragile and intoxicating. Then, without warning, I heard the unmistakable sound of keys in the lock.
Emma.
My heart slammed against my ribs as panic surged. I barely had time to consider hiding behind the bedroom door or ducking into the closet. The adrenaline coursed through me, sharp and exhilarating. I realized with a mix of terror and thrill, that everything I had embraced, the lipstick, the blouse, the skirt, the heels, was now fully exposed to the potential of discovery. Emma entered, humming softly, a bundle of work documents in her hands. She glanced up and froze mid-step, her eyes widening as they swept over me. The moment stretched into eternity. My breath caught. My reflection in her eyes was no longer private. It was scrutinized, analyzed, and revealed in the harsh light of reality. You look," she began, words faltering, tone a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something else I couldn't yet identify. My mind raced. Was this admiration, judgment, confusion? I couldn't tell. My lips, painted a bold red, trembled slightly as I searched her expression, trying to gauge whether my secret life could survive this confrontation intact. Emma's gaze softened slightly. "I didn't know you wanted to explore this side of yourself." Her voice was gentle, almost hesitant, but there was a hint of fascination underneath. My chest tightened. Relief and fear collided once more. The secret I had nurtured, the thrill I had chased, the identity I had temporarily embodied, it was no longer mine alone. And yet, the suspense didn't end. The lipstick, the skirt, the heels, the blouse, they were no longer just symbols of transformation. They were symbols of revelation, of risk, of a dual identity that could no longer remain hidden. And in that suspended moment, as Emma continued to watch, I realized that my life had irrevocably changed. One decision, one word, one movement could define the course of my secret life from that point forward. And as I stood there, trembling slightly on heels that had become both my armor and my vulnerability, I understood the truth. The adventure had only just begun. Emma's eyes were locked on me, wide with surprise, curiosity, and something I couldn't yet identify. The seconds stretched endlessly. My heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as I tried to stand taller, projecting confidence I didn't fully feel. My fingers trembled slightly as they grazed the hem of the blouse, a subtle reminder of the persona I had fully embraced. "Alex, you're different," Emma whispered, voice trembling as much as my own heart. The words weren't judgmental, they weren't harsh, but the uncertainty in them was almost worse. This wasn't just about clothing or makeup. This was a confrontation with the secret identity I had nurtured in private, now exposed to someone I cared about more than anyone. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. I wanted to try to see what it felt like. My voice cracked slightly, betraying my anxiety. The lipstick glistened on my lips, bold and red, a symbol of the audacious risk I had taken. Emma's expression softened, but then a frown flickered across her face. "But why hide it? Why not tell me?" Her words weren't accusatory, but they cut deeper than any judgment ever could. I realized that this was the moment when everything hung in the balance: trust, understanding, and the delicate equilibrium of our relationship. Before I could respond, there was a sudden knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Not Emma, someone else. A neighbor or maybe a delivery, I didn't know. The suspense coiled around me like a living thing. My heels made it difficult to move quickly, but I had to act. I tiptoed to the door, careful to keep my movements elegant, and peeked through the peephole. A young man stood there, holding a clipboard and a pen. "Package for Emma?" he asked. My relief was immediate but fleeting. The interruption reminded me how fragile this world I had built truly was. I opened the door just enough to accept the package, forcing my composure to remain intact, but my pulse was racing. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, a warning that my secret could unravel at any moment. Returning to the living room, I saw Emma examining me with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. She didn't speak immediately, but I could sense her curiosity, her need to understand the transformation before her. I adjusted the blouse, swaying slightly in the heels, and felt the skirt brush against my thighs, a sensual, nerve-wracking reminder of the dual life I was living. "You look stunning," she finally said, her voice soft, tinged with awe. My chest tightened. This wasn't just validation, it was recognition of a part of myself I had long kept hidden. But the words also carried a weight of expectation, a question hanging silently between us. Now that you've revealed this side of yourself, what comes next? I took a cautious step closer, careful not to stumble in the heels. I didn't mean to hide it forever. I wasn't sure how you'd react. My gaze met hers, searching for understanding, for acceptance. Emma sighed, a mix of relief and tension in her breath. I need time to process this, she admitted. But I'm not upset. I just want to understand you better. Her honesty was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because I wasn't immediately rejected. Terrifying because the real challenge, the negotiation of this secret life with someone else knowing, was just beginning. As we stood there, a sudden thought struck me. The heels, the skirt, the blouse, the lipstick, they weren't just clothes or accessories. They were symbols, a tangible representation of the side of me that had remained hidden. And yet, the vulnerability they brought was undeniable. One slip, one misstep, one moment of panic, and the illusion could collapse entirely. I moved toward the mirror again, examining my reflection alongside Emma. The lipstick was perfectly applied, the blouse and skirt framing my form elegantly. But now there was an added layer, the presence of another person fully witnessing this transformation. Every detail felt magnified, the sway of my hips, the tilt of my head, the subtle tension in my hands. Emma reached out tentatively, brushing a finger against the blouse. "It's so different from what I imagined," she murmured. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. The intimacy of the moment was electrifying, the suspense almost unbearable. I realized that this was no longer just about personal exploration. It was about negotiation, trust, and the delicate balance between exposure and acceptance. A sudden noise from the hallway made me jump, a floorboard creaking, a door opening somewhere else in the building. My heart raced, heels clicking against the floor as I shifted nervously. The adrenaline was overwhelming, but it also sharpened my awareness, making each sensation more vivid. The smooth fabric of the blouse against my skin, the tight curve of the skirt, the precarious balance of the heels, the bold smear of red lipstick on my lips. Emma's gaze never left me. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. My throat was dry, words caught somewhere between fear and exhilaration. Yes, I managed, though the truth was more complicated. I was terrified, yes, but also exhilarated. Vulnerable, yes, but alive in a way I had never experienced before. The package I had received earlier sat on the floor, a mundane object that now felt almost symbolic, a reminder of the ordinary world outside, the reality that waited beyond this suspended, transformative moment. I glanced at it, then back at Emma. This duality, ordinary life and secret identity, was no longer separate. They had collided, and there was no going back. I took a careful step closer, feeling the weight of the heels, the sway of the skirt, the smooth fabric of the blouse. Emma mirrored my movements slightly, curiosity shining in her eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick, electric. The transformation was complete, but the stakes had never been higher. A sudden thought struck me. What if someone else found out? What if friends, colleagues, or family members discovered this side of me? The fear was immediate, visceral, but so was the thrill. The secret had been exhilarating when private, but now, the exposure added a dimension I hadn't anticipated. Emma's hand reached for mine, tentative but steady. "I want to understand," she said. Her voice was calm, deliberate, but there was an edge of uncertainty. Every nerve in my body was on fire, every sense heightened. The lipstick, the blouse, the skirt, the heels, they were no longer just symbols of personal transformation. They were instruments of vulnerability, trust, and connection. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration as I allowed her to see this side of me fully, completely. The suspense, the tension, the potential for disaster, it all mingled with a heady sense of liberation. I realized that the secret life I had lived in private was no longer mine alone. And in that realization lay both terror and joy, a precarious balance that could shift in an instant. The room was silent except for our breaths, our subtle movements, the soft click of heels against the hardwood floor. The suspense was unbearable, a taut string that could snap at any moment. I knew that one misstep, one word, one accidental revelation could unravel everything. But I also knew that this exposure, this confrontation, this shared secret, was transformative in a way I had never imagined. Emma leaned closer, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and empathy. "You are more than I imagined," she whispered. My lips trembled, the red lipstick catching the light. Every fiber of my being was alive, electric with suspense, exhilaration, and fear. The transformation was no longer just physical, it was emotional, psychological, relational. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, there was a knock at the door. Not Emma. Someone else. My pulse spiked. The suspense, the fear, the thrill, all converged in a single, breathless moment. I froze, poised on heels that felt suddenly too high, skirt swaying delicately, blouse smooth against my skin, lipstick vibrant and daring. The knock came again, insistent. My mind raced. Who could it be? Was it a neighbor, a delivery, someone who would shatter this fragile equilibrium? Every instinct screamed to hide, to duck, to protect the secret identity I had just revealed to Emma. Emma's gaze met mine, calm but questioning. "Should I?" she asked. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, a subtle challenge, an invitation. The suspense was unbearable. One decision, one action, one movement could define everything. The balance between exposure and concealment, vulnerability and safety, thrill and disaster. I realized then that my life had changed irrevocably. The secret I had nurtured, the identity I had explored, the thrill I had chased, they were no longer mine alone. And as the knock echoed through the apartment, I understood that the climax had arrived. The moment of reckoning was here, poised between discovery and liberation, fear and exhilaration, the old self and the new. The knock at the door sounded again, louder this time, echoing through the apartment like a warning. My pulse thundered in my ears, heels clicking sharply against the hardwood as I took a hesitant step back. Emma's eyes were locked on mine, a mixture of anticipation and concern. Neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than words, charged with the weight of what had just happened. I glanced at the mirror across the room. The reflection staring back at me wasn't just Alex in borrowed lipstick. It was a version of myself I had kept hidden for months, maybe years. Every line of my face, every movement, every curve emphasized the duality I was now forced to live with. And yet, now that Emma had seen me, now that she knew, the thrill was magnified, but so was the fear. "Should I answer it?" Emma's voice was soft but deliberate. Her hand hovered near the doorknob, a silent challenge. My heart skipped. If I answered, the secret would be exposed again, to someone I couldn't predict. If I didn't, I'd leave the interruption unresolved, a growing tension in the room. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and shook my head. I don't know. Maybe it's better if we wait." My voice trembled, betraying my fear. I could feel the skirt brushing my thighs, the blouse snug across my shoulders, the unfamiliar but intoxicating sensation of the heels grounding me in this new identity. Each element reminded me how fragile this balance truly was. The knock came again, insistent, almost impatient. My hands clenched the hem of the skirt, and I felt Emma's presence beside me, a quiet, steadying anchor in the chaos. For a moment, I imagined opening the door and facing whatever challenge waited on the other side. My mind raced through possibilities. A neighbor, a delivery, someone from work, even a friend who might recognize me in this new form. The suspense twisted in my chest like a living thing. Emma reached out, lightly touching my arm. "Alex, no matter what happens, I've seen you. I know part of who you are now." Her words were reassuring, but the fear still clawed at me. This wasn't just about identity or transformation anymore. It was about vulnerability, exposure, and the possibility of judgment from the world outside these walls. Another knock. louder, more urgent. My pulse was almost unbearable. I stepped toward the door, each movement slow and deliberate, the sound of my heels amplified in the quiet apartment. I could feel the tension in Emma's body behind me, her breath shallow, her presence both comforting and intensifying the suspense. I reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling, and paused. One turn, one swing, one glance outside, and the secret could be uncovered, or worse, misinterpreted. My reflection in the mirror caught my eye again, and I saw not just Alex or the borrowed lipstick, but a glimpse of courage I hadn't known I possessed. The doorknob rattled under the force of the next knock. My breath caught. I glanced at Emma, whose eyes silently asked, "Are you ready?" I wasn't, but at the same time, part of me knew that hiding forever wasn't an option. I had stepped too far into this world, into this identity, and now every moment was a choice: retreat, reveal, or risk it all. Before I could make a decision, the door swung open abruptly. A figure stood there, partially obscured by shadows. I couldn't make out their face immediately, but the suddenness sent my heart into overdrive. Emma stepped slightly behind me, protective but curious. The stranger's gaze scanned the room, lingering on me, on the transformation, on the lipstick, the blouse, the skirt, the heels, the entire expression of who I had become in secret. "Alex," the figure said, their voice hesitant, questioning, almost like they weren't entirely sure what they were seeing. The suspense was unbearable. Was it recognition, judgment, shock? Every second stretched into eternity. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. The stranger took a tentative step forward, and in that instant, the entire apartment seemed suspended in tension, caught between revelation and concealment, fear and exhilaration, vulnerability and empowerment. Emma's hand found mine, squeezing gently, grounding me in the midst of chaos. My reflection in the mirror showed every detail: lips bold with red, blouse smooth and elegant, skirt swaying, heels tall and precarious, and eyes wide with a mixture of thrill and terror. I realized then that my secret life, once confined to private spaces, was now exposed to someone else. The stakes had never been higher. The stranger finally spoke again, this time with a hint of realization in their tone. "I didn't expect to see this side of you." The words were careful, cautious, but the tension didn't lift. My heart raced as I tried to measure the implications. What would they think? What would Emma think? What would happen next? And then, just as I was about to respond, the door clicked from the outside. Someone else's voice echoed faintly down the hall, followed by laughter. The intruder glanced nervously toward the noise, hesitation in every movement. The moment stretched, unresolved, the suspense palpable. I turned slightly toward Emma. Her expression mirrored mine: uncertainty, fear, curiosity, and anticipation. The lipstick, the skirt, the blouse, the heels, they were no longer just symbols of my private identity. They were markers of a moment that had changed everything. The stranger's gaze lingered, a silent question hanging in the air, and then they stepped back, hesitating at the threshold, leaving the door partially open. The knock, the interruption, the exposure, it all converged into a single, breathless instant. I realized something crucial: nothing would ever be the same. My secret, my identity, the thrill, the vulnerability, it had all collided into reality. And in that suspended moment, I understood that every choice from here on out would carry weight, consequences, and uncertainty. The door remained ajar, the figure frozen in the threshold, and the hallway beyond hinted at a world outside that now held knowledge of what I had once kept hidden. My heart pounded, the heels pressing into the floor, the skirt swaying, the lipstick bright and undeniable. Every sense was heightened, every nerve alight with suspense and possibility. Emma squeezed my hand again. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," she said softly. Her reassurance was grounding, but it couldn't erase the tension in the room, the uncertainty of the moment, the suspense that clung to every surface, every sound, every breath. I took a deep breath, lips trembling, eyes fixed on the figure at the door. My secret life had been revealed in part, and the world outside was no longer predictable. I realized with a mix of fear and exhilaration that this was only the beginning. And then the screen of suspense cut sharply to black in my mind, the unresolved tension hanging like a living thing. The viewers, the audience, the world outside, everything waited for the next moment, the next revelation, the next choice.